With San Francisco 49ers OTAs off and running, one of the biggest things that we are on the lookout for is what is going on with the 49ers offensive line. Now, we know through all of the offseason chatter, there's been so much talk about upgrading the 49ers offensive line. And the San Francisco 49ers opted to not draft any offensive linemen in the first or second round. However, they did draft Dominick Puni out of Kansas to play interior offensive line. He was a left tackle in college. He's played multiple spots, but he translates best to the interior. And so one of the things that we're on the lookout for is, well, where's he going to play? And does he have a chance at starting this year? That remains to be seen. It's still really early on, but we do have some updates early on in OTAs about the offensive line, and that it could open up some doors for some other players to play in some spots that they haven't played in recently. So let's get into it all, and let's start with the update out of OTAs. Kyle Shanahan has let us know that Jake Brendel will not practice throughout the duration of OTAs. Sounds like mandatory minicamp, and he will be ready to go for training camp. It sounds like he's dealing with some knee tendonitis, and so they're playing it safe. They're not going to push it. So Brendel, who's been the 49ers starting center the last two seasons, won't be that in that role for the offseason program until training camp. So that means there is some shuffling that will be occurring up front for the 49ers offensive line. Now, this is an interesting time period because guys like Trent Williams typically don't practice. So Jalen Moore will likely take most of the left tackle reps for this period of time that Trent Williams doesn't practice. But we can go ahead and just cement Trent Williams in there as the starting left tackle, right? No questions about that. But with the injury to Jake Brendel, it does open up the door for a bit of a shuffling amongst the interior. So we're going to talk about that right now. Aaron Banks, according to reports, I believe Matt Barrows of The Athletic was stating that Aaron Banks went out there at left guard, so no surprise there. But to fill in for Jake Brendel at center, it was Jonathan Feliciano. Now, this makes perfect sense. This is exactly what I assumed would be the case with Brendel being out, because Jonathan Feliciano is the best center on the team, not named Jake Brendel. Some may have the opinion that Feliciano could be even a better center than Jake Brendel, because Feliciano has gotten multiple starts across the league at center. He played all season in 2022 as the starting center for the New York Giants. So he definitely has the experience required to be able to come right in and play center for the San Francisco 49ers. So what will be fascinating to see is, at least among the talking points of the fan base heading into this, is Jake Brendel going to be challenged for his starting role? Jake Brendel, I thought, started out the season, his first two games, really hot and on fire. And as the season progressed, kind of regressed a little bit and, wasn't at his best at times. I think a lot of people think he was really, really bad, which I don't necessarily believe. I think he was more somewhere in the middle, had some really good reps at times, and at other times, was overpowered in the run game. I would say that would be the biggest thing that I saw from Jake Brendel, especially when you go back to that Bengals game against DJ Reader, who was just really making it difficult for Brendel and just disrupting everything on the interior for that 49ers offensive line. So it'll be fascinating, though, to see where guys like Dominick Puni will line up. Will he be eventually shifted over to center to compete there? Is he going to be at one of the guard spots? That will be fascinating to see. But we did get our first piece of insight in regard to that, because Jonathan Feliciano is most likely going to be slated as the starting right guard once Brendel returns, because as we know, Spencer Burford struggled last year and was ultimately benched for the playoffs in favor of Jonathan Feliciano. So I do expect Feliciano to kick back out to right guard. where he did find some success. And then, of course, you're going to have Colton McKivitz there at right tackle. But according to Matt Barrow, Dominick Puni did take a majority of the snaps at right guard. So that is a very interesting just baseline of where they are working him initially. And it sounds like it will be at right guard. So now you kind of have a log jam at that position. You have guys like Burford, you have Puni now, you have Nick Zakel, who was a 6th-round draft pick who didn't play last year because he tore his bicep. So that had him out for a big portion of the season. But you also have Ben Barch, who the San Francisco 49ers re-signed. You've got guys like Jarrett Kingston, Drake Nugent, Bryson Mays that could all have guard versatility. So it's going to be fascinating to see what the starting offensive line is at the beginning of the year and what the starting offensive line could be at the end of the year. But I do believe when it's all said and done and Brendel returns to training camp, that the 49ers will start the season with the same offensive line that they started with the playoffs. So that means Trent Williams, Aaron Banks, Jake Brendel, Jonathan Feliciano, Colton McKivitz. Now, if there is any type of world where the 49ers feel like Brendel hasn't improved, hasn't taken those steps forward, and they feel he needs to maybe take a seat for a little bit to see how everything works out, they have the option to kick Jonathan Feliciano to the inside. But I'm really hopeful that Brendel could replicate what he started off the season like and just sustain that for the entirety of the season. Because I remember going back, I just remember watching the tape. I remember tweeting about it. I was like, dude, Jake Brendel looks like he has definitely improved from what he did the year prior. However, he kind of cooled off, like we talked about. Like I think there's this narrative like he was terrible. He wasn't terrible. He was serviceable. He needs to improve in the run game against power defensive tackles. But I think if you can get some stability at the guard spots, I think that it will also help Jake Brendel too, because you have to remember last year, Banks was out, Burford was out, and then Feliciano was just flip flopping back and forth. And that presents challenges to a center to have to kind of change his game based on the personnel, who's next to him, and kind of have to pick up those things. So I think there's room for improvement for Jake Brendel, definitely. But again, I think the narrative is somewhere, you know, on the extremes. And I think it's more kind of in the middle. And I really think that's kind of the case for the whole starting offensive line. I think there's going to be room for Colton McKivitz to improve. I think once you get some solidified right guard play where it's the same guy for 17 games, I think that will create better continuity for that group up front. And I do think this group has the ability to get better, but it starts on the interior, and those guys need to stay healthy and they need to stay on the field. And I think that was a huge issue with the continuity early on. So we'll see how it all ultimately plays out. But I think it's going to be a fascinating development once we get to training camp and the pads start popping and see who gets some opportunities to play where. But as it stands right now with no Jake Brendel, Feliciano kicks to the inside. Spencer Burford, your starting right tackle. And Dominick Puni is your backup right guard. We'll continue to see how everything else develops throughout OTAs, mandatory minicamp, and training camp. But all eyes are definitely going to be on the offensive line this offseason. Let me know what you guys think about the offensive line in the comments below. I think I'm going to be doing a extensive Colton McKivitz film breakdown of last season, the good, the bad, where he can improve, just because I feel like the conversation around him isn't accurate one way or the other. So I want to do the film breakdown and really be able to discern where he is currently with his game after his first season at starting right tackle and where I think he could develop into into year 2. But let me know what you guys think if you want to see that video, and also let me know what you think about the current state of the offensive line in the comments below. And as always, make sure to like and subscribe for more updates.